Yeah, hello and welcome to our lecture series, Climate Protection. Welcome to the audience here in the lecture hall. Welcome to our Aurora students from Innsbruck, Iceland, Amsterdam, but today especially from Duisburg-Essen. As the lecture of today and in 2 weeks are streamed from the University of Duisburg-Essen. These two lectures from Florian Freitag and Jens Gur. And we have transdisciplinary European research-driven educational hubs within the Aurora 2030 project. There are 5 educational hubs. And the Sustainability and Climate Change Hub is in the task lead of University of Innsbruck, and the Culture and Diversities Identities from Duisburg-Essen. And so we collaborate with Duisburg-Essen. Last semester we streamed 2 lectures. It's just an introduction. The next will be better. Sorry for the bad audio quality. Yeah, the next lecture, the lecture of the last semester, there were 2 lectures streamed to Duisburg-Essen, and now 2 of them will streamed here to Innsbruck. Today by our special guest, Florian Freitag. Florian Freitag received his PhD in North American Literatures from the University of Constance in Germany in 2011 and has been a professor of American Studies at the University of Duisburg-Essen in Germany since 2019. Freitag is the author of several books on American literature. A former employee of Disneyland Paris, Freitag has co-written the first transdisciplinary introduction to the theme parks, Key Concepts in the Theme Park Studies, Understanding Tourism and Leisure Spaces. Today, he will talk about sustainability in Disney theme parks. The title is A Greener Tomorrowland. Welcome, Florian Freitag.
Thank you very much, Rainer. Hello to everyone in the Agnes Heller house in Innsbruck, and also to everyone online. I'm very happy to be here to return the favor after we got 2 lectures from Innsbruck last semester. Now we're returning the favor, giving you 2 lectures. I have prepared some slides, and if you make me a presenter, thank you very much, then I can show them to you as well. By the way, I'm more than happy to share these slides with the students afterwards. If you want to read up on them, or if you want to follow some of the links, I'm more than happy to send them to Rainer Pfluger, and then you can share them on OLAT. All right. Usually when I do a lecture on theme parks, I start by asking people in the audience whether they've already been to a theme park and which theme park they've been to. This is kind of difficult today, which is why I'll start with a general introduction to theme parks with a definition of what a theme park is, and then also with a short history of theme parks. Of the development of this medium, as you might call it. And then in the rest of this lecture, we'll actually focus on sustainability aspects of theme parks. And I've listed some learning outcomes, which I will show you again at the end of the lecture. And so you can check whether you think you have achieved these outcomes. And if you haven't, well, we have ample time for questions at the end. So the learning outcomes, I'm just going to read them out now. They are, by the end of this lecture, you should be able to explain the principle of thematic selection at theme parks. So how theme parks choose their themes. You should also be able to explain the use of sustainability as a corporate strategy in the theme park industry. And finally, you should be able to explain the strategies of sustainable urban planning in theme park cities. And already from these learning outcomes, you can tell that we're going to take a look at theme parks from different perspectives in this lecture. So after the definition and a short history of theme parks, in the first part, we're going to take a look at theme parks as media, as a medial platform that tells stories and that transports certain topics. And we're going to take a look at past and unfortunately also unsustainable futures as they were presented, particularly in Disney theme parks, especially in Disneyland in California. In the second part, we're going to take a look at theme parks as companies, the theme park business as an industry, and how the theme park industry uses sustainability as a corporate strategy. Of course, it might also be the case that some people are genuinely interested in becoming more sustainable, but if you look at what the theme parks do now, what the theme park companies do, it's you can describe this as whatever they do in the field of sustainability as a corporate strategy. And then finally, something that I guess most people do not know, but a lot of theme park companies and the Walt Disney Company especially, they do not only do theme parks, but they also do real estate. And in fact, most often they combine theme park projects with real estate projects. So they don't just build a theme park and operate the theme park, but they also build an entire city next to the theme park, and that sort of has a reciprocal relationship with the park. And so in the last part of this lecture, I want to take a look at one of these theme park cities, namely the city that was built right next to Disneyland Paris, and where I also lived when I worked for Disneyland Paris. So this is, I think, very interesting because in the beginning, this was simply seen as, well, feeding into the theme park, servicing the theme park, a city that whose entire reason of existence was only the theme park. But now, after about 30 years, they have started introducing more and more elements of sustainability into the urban planning of that city. So I think this is also quite interesting to look at that. So theme parks as media in the first part, theme parks as companies, as an industry in the second part, and theme parks as urban planners in the third part. But before we do that, let me give you a simple definition of what a theme park is. I guess you all have an intuitive understanding of that word, theme park. And there is this very easy formula that says, well, a theme park is an amusement park with a particular theme. Yes, roughly you can say it like this, but I've given you here a scholarly definition by a tourism scholar, Hans-Jürgen Kagelmann. It's quite old, from 1993, but I still think it fits. Here's what he says: a theme park, according to Kagelmann, is an enclosed, spacious, artificially constructed, stationary collection of various attractions, games, and other forms of entertainment that is predominantly located on the outskirts of large cities or metropolitan areas, that is open year-round, and that is commercially structured. Now, this applies to about 99% of all theme parks in the world. There are theme parks that are closed during the winter season, depending on the region where they're located. There are also theme parks that are not commercially structured, especially in Asia. There's a communist party theme park in China, which is, of course, not commercially structured, but which is open to the public. And there's another one in Indonesia, Mini Indonesia, which is actually a government project. So they're not companies, they haven't been designed to make money. These are a little different, but as I said, this applies to 99% of all theme parks in the world. Now, what Kagelmann just said in that first sentence would also apply to an amusement park, but of course, a theme park is a little more than an amusement park. He goes on: the constitutive characteristic of theme parks is their thematic unity. That is, either the park as a whole or individual self-contained parts of it are shaped by certain recognizable motifs, themes, characters, etc. So this is what makes the park a theme park. It has a theme. Whatever you find in it, in that park, conforms to that particular theme or to the themes that the designers have chosen. I've given you two examples here. One is, I guess, the one that's fairly close to Innsbruck. Europa Park is located in southwestern Germany, in close to Freiburg, and is, well, the name says it all. It has different sections dedicated to individual European countries. This is the theme of the park, Europe and the individual countries. And there's a section on Austria as well. The other one is the theme park closest to where I live now. I live in Essen, and the closest theme park here is Phantasialand. It has a more eclectic roster of themes. So here you can see the Mexican section. They also have a China section, but then they also have a Gothic section and a fantasy section, they call it, and now they have a middle age section. So it's kind of all over the place. It's a little less rigid than the governing theme of Europa Park. We're going to talk about the Disney theme parks in just a second. I did this on purpose here, not giving you Disney theme parks as examples because they're so well known. But of course, when you talk about the development of theme parks, then you cannot not talk about the Disney theme parks, especially because over the more than 70 years of their existence, they have been trendsetters in several ways. So what I've done here is given you a timeline of how the theme park industry has developed. And for each step, I've used one of the Disney parks as an illustration of that particular step. So it starts with in 1955 with the opening of what may be considered the first modern theme park in the contemporary sense of the term, namely Disneyland in Anaheim in Southern California. Very much a product of its time, very much a product of its place as well. Don't have the time to go into that here, but there are several reasons why this particular form of entertainment, place-based entertainment, developed in Southern California in the 1950s. However, by 1971, the theme park had spread over all of North America. And what had also happened was that the theme park was no longer just a destination for a day trip. You go there in the morning and then you go back home in the evening. But the companies developed the first theme park resorts. So places where you can spend at least 2 days, or as in the case of, and here's the next Disney theme park, the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida. I think you can easily spend 2 weeks there and go to a different place, to a different theme park, to a different water park, whatever, on each single day. It has become a huge place. But as I said, the Magic Kingdom, Walt Disney World, they weren't the only ones. Theme parks all over North America would develop into resorts around this time. Next up, Tokyo Disneyland, which was opened in 1983 in, Tokyo in Japan. And this also marks the beginning of the spread of theme parks to Asia, and specifically Japan. We'll come to China in a bit, but the one country where theme parks first developed outside of the United States was indeed Japan. And Tokyo Disneyland was one of the first ones there. Western Europe had its theme park, its Märchen parks, its amusement parks, of course, but it was really the announcement of Disneyland Paris in 1992 in France, which sort of spurred the development of theme parks, not just in France, but all over Europe. Europa Park, which I just showed you, is a little older. So is Phantasialand, which I also just showed you. But if you look at Parc Astérix in France, Futuroscope in France, and a bunch of others that in the meantime have closed, you can really say that Disneyland Paris spurred the development of this industry in Western Europe. China had been the site of theme parks since the mid-1990s, more or less. And when then Disney decided to build a park in Hong Kong, Hong Kong Disneyland, opened in 2005, more and more international chains also started investing in China and opening up theme parks there. So once again, Disney was a trendsetter to a certain extent, in the sense that the Chinese, they had their own local theme parks, mostly regional theme parks, but with Disney, also the other big chains like Universal came to the People's Republic of China. The second park in China is a very interesting one. Shanghai Disneyland opened in Shanghai. Like Hong Kong Disneyland also operated in collaboration with the local government. So it's a semi-private investment here, and it's very interesting how the two partners work together in these cases. But it also marks, of course, the spread of theme parks to northern China. They had started in Hong Kong, but now they also moved to northern China, to Shanghai, and trying to use this huge amount of people as potential guests for their theme park. I also wanted to give you some numbers, just so you get a sense of how relevant theme parks are really when they transport their themes or tell their stories. So the figures here are from 2022. These are the most recent figures that I could find. Every year, the International Association of Theme Parks publishes the report, and the report for 2023 hasn't come out yet. So these are the figures from 2022. The industry has really bounced back from COVID. COVID, of course, was a disaster for the theme park industry because international travel was not possible. There were attendance restrictions on individual parks, so they couldn't live up to their full potential, but could only welcome a fraction of the number of people that they usually welcome. But now the industry is back, and the Disney theme parks alone, so those that are listed here, they welcomed 113 million people in 2022. If you consider all of the theme parks, not just the big ones like Disney and Universal, but even the smaller ones, we're talking about a billion people, a billion visits to theme parks globally in 2022. So quite an impact, not only in terms of culture, in terms of what people see, but of course also in terms of transportation and the use of resources for traveling alone. Here I've given you just an example of what a theme park looks like, what the layout of a theme park looks like. I've chosen an old map of Disneyland in California, a map from 1966. The map hasn't changed basically since then. The basic layout is still the same. And I just wanted to show you how how space is organized within such a park. Because interestingly enough, you only have one entrance where everyone must go through, and this entrance is followed by a corridor, which is basically a street lined with restaurants and shops. So from a management perspective, this is very smart because people will have to go through that avenue on their way in. They have to pass all the shops, and then again on their way out, they have to go through all the shops and pass all the restaurants and ice cream stores and so on. So this is partly where they make their money. Once you've been through that corridor, you arrive at Central Plaza, and there you have the castle, the stereotypical castle of a Disney theme park. And from that Central Plaza, you have the choice to go into differently themed areas. For Disney, it's always the same. It's one area themed to adventure, the tropics, jungle, and so on and so forth. You have a Wild West land. Disney calls this Frontierland. You have a themed section dedicated to children's stories, fairy tales, called Fantasyland. And you always have one section dedicated to the future, because this is not just the layout of Disneyland in California, but this is also the basic layout of all the other Disney parks in the world. They always reuse that same basic pattern. I'll later show you an example of Tomorrowland from California, and then also an example the Tomorrowland in Shanghai. They're very different, but the basic layout of the park is the same. All right, so this is my very, very general introduction to theme parks. Now let's take a look at how theme parks deal with sustainability in their role as media, as companies, as corporations, and as urban planners. Um, what I've done here, this table here connects back to the layout that I've just shown you, because what I've done here is I have put together what researchers say are the most popular themes in theme parks all over the world. So there's different studies of this. The earliest one by Anton Clavé from 2007. They're all tourism scholars, basically. Younger is actually a former theme park designer who then wrote a book on theme park design. Steinecke, Anton Clavé, Phillips, and Gottina, they are tourism scholars. And they all have established lists of what, according to their studies, are the most popular themes in theme parks. So I've put them together here, and I found that there's a lot of convergence between those different studies, because you see all of them, Gottina, Anton Clavé, Steinecke, Phillips, Younger, they all list the Wild West and tropical paradise, adventure, exotic places, treasure islands, exotica as a common theme in theme parks. So that is a surefire sign that this theme is actually part of a lot of theme parks. And now if you compare this list to the basic layout of Disneyland, which I've shown you on the previous slide, you will realize that all of the themes of Disneyland are actually represented in that list. We go from tropical paradise in Adventureland to Wild West in Frontierland, nostalgia and retro fashions on Main Street, USA, that shopping corridor that I showed you, fairy tale, children's stories in Fantasyland, and finally modernism and progress, future, sci-fi, and so on in Tomorrowland. So this really just shows how much of an impact the Walt Disney Company and its theme parks had on the development of the industry, not just with respect to how theme parks developed as resorts, where theme parks developed, and so on. We already discussed this, but also with respect to the actual themes that are represented in theme parks. Now, how do theme park designers and theme park companies come up with these themes? And why is it that a lot of theme parks have a Wild West themed section or a tropically themed section, and so on and so forth? How is it that whether you go to North America or to Asia, you'll find roughly the same themes in those parks? Well, there are some general designing principles or theming strategies, as I've called them here, and I thought I would introduce a few of them, not just to explain why theme parks choose these themes, but also why theme parks do not choose other themes. Because you may have noticed, there are a lot of places among these themes, the Wild West, tropical islands, and so on and so forth. There's also historical periods, retro 19th century, but also the future on the other hand. But there's no really controversial or difficult themes. Politics never features in this. Violence never features in this. And sustainability does not feature in most theme parks either. So how can we explain this? How can we explain what is there and how can we explain what is not there? Well, I've put together these theming strategies. And the first one is simply called externality. And I'm quoting a theme park scholar here, Steinkrüger, who says, spatial, temporal, or worldly externality is a necessary condition for a space to be perceived as a themed space. What that really means is simply that there needs to be a perceived difference between the location of the themed space, the location of the theme park, and the theme of the theme park. So in my case, for instance, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to put a theme park themed to Essen into the city of Essen, because you wouldn't recognize it as a theme space. It would make very much sense to put a China-themed theme park into Essen, or a French-themed theme park, or a middle-age-themed theme park, whatever. But anything but a Germany or a Essen-themed theme park. Disney tried this once. They opened up a place called, or a park called Disney California Adventure in California, and it flopped because it was in contemporary California and it was themed to contemporary California, and it didn't work. And so what they did was they created some temporal externality by moving the theme 100 years back. Now the theme park depicts the beginning of the 20th century in California. So at least you have the feeling of time traveling when you go into that theme park. Yeah. So externality as one principle. Second principle, recognizability. I've chosen a quote here by, well, myself and a friend. Recognition is the moment of reception. What that means is that theming only works when your visitors actually recognize what you're trying to theme. So if you're theming in a way that is not recognizable to people, if you do a French or a Paris themed space without an Eiffel Tower, that might actually be kind of difficult for visitors to understand that this is supposed to be Paris. I have an example from Europa Park. Europa Park, as I said, is themed to different European countries. The usual, you have France, England, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and so on and so forth. They recently introduced a section themed to Liechtenstein, which is, of course, sponsored by the Liechtenstein Tourism Company. But when you go to that space, you realize they have a hard time theming Liechtenstein, because what do people associate with Liechtenstein? How are you supposed to realize that this is Liechtenstein and not Switzerland or Austria? Well, they put up a lot of Liechtenstein flags and put up a lot of signs that say Liechtenstein, but apart from that, it doesn't really work because it's simply not recognizable enough. The country is simply not well established enough in people's virtual minds to allow for theming. A final theme, and here, or a final strategy, and here is where it gets really interesting, is the idea of selection. So theme parks choose their theme, say 19th century Paris, the future in California, whatever, but then they have to edit it. Because after all, theme parks are family spaces. Theme parks are spaces that try to attract a maximum amount of visitors. And that means that problematic and or contested issues such as war or slavery, violence, but also sustainability, environmental problems, are regularly excluded from the themed space, from the theme park. There are exceptions. For example, dark theming. When you go to a theme park now, you will realize that a lot of them are Halloween themed or have a Halloween overlay, a seasonal overlay for Halloween. So you get a little bit of death, you get a little bit of spooky, but this is really just for the season, and people can understand it because it's meant to be a joyous celebration. Dark theming also may be in the case of haunted mansions, so something like a spooky ride, but even then, things are considerably toned down. And I would say this is also the reason why certain serious topics, which could be presented via theming, such as war, slavery, history in general, but also sustainability, climate change, you won't find them in theme parks because it just violates this strategy of selection, whereby all of these negative, problematic, contested issues, serious issues that make you think about important issues, they're usually simply edited out of the theme park. You can actually see how that works when you add yet another theming strategy, namely updates. Because you can tell through those updates that sustainability may not be present directly as a theme in theme parks, but it is somehow present indirectly because over time, theme parks have updated their themes. They continuously adjust their offerings, as it says here, to evolving notions of political or social acceptability and appropriateness. And this is precisely what theme parks have done also with respect to sustainability and environmental concerns. Because in the past, there were some presentations, some themes, some rides, some attractions in theme parks that at the time may have been okay, that at the time may have followed that rule of selection, but nowadays they wouldn't do that anymore because people have evolved and our notions of environmental concerns and sustainability have evolved. So what was okay then would actually be now considered as problematic or contested. So in the following, I'm going to give you a few examples of rides and attractions and exhibits that have been taken out of theme parks because the theme parks realized, oh, this may have been okay 10 years ago, but now people have evolved and we cannot longer present this in our park. And of course, all of these examples have something to do with sustainability. Now, all of my examples come from the Tomorrowland section of Disneyland in California. And here you've got an overview. This is what Tomorrowland looked like in the 1950s. This is how far we go back. I'm giving you some examples from the very early Tomorrowland. The park opened in 1955, and I'm giving you examples from the first decade or so of Tomorrowland. Now, all of these examples do not exist in the form that I'm going to show you anymore because I think Disney at some point realized that this is not up to contemporary standards of sustainability anymore. The first one is Richfield Oil's Autopia. Basically, you can drive your individual little cars around a fake highway. Youngsters of all ages, it says here in the official description, can navigate these modernistic freeways of the future. So here the car and the freeway is touted as the transportation feature of the future. Tomorrowland actually had a few attractions, a few rides that were themed to public mass transportation, even electrically driven or electrically powered mass transportation, but the car was king. And there's a good reason for that because, of course, the attraction here is sponsored or was sponsored by Richfield Oil. Yeah, so they touted their own business here, so to speak. And at the very beginning, at least, Disneyland needed sponsors in order to build all those attractions. So here, the car as the means of transportation of the future, I'm not quite sure that will go down just as well nowadays. It still exists, but they've upgraded to electric cars, at least in some versions of Autopia, in some versions of Disney theme parks. From Richfield Oil's Autopia, we move on to Richfield Oil's World Beneath Us. Richfield Oil sponsored two attractions at Disneyland at the time, not just Autopia, but also The World Beneath Us, which was an exhibit about the modern methods of oil extraction. So not just is the car advertised as the means of transportation of the future, after all, this is all set in Tomorrowland, but oil is celebrated as the source of energy of the future. And not just oil, but also gas. You can see here, and this is what the place looked like. So really a very industrial pavilion, and the whole thing was just an exhibit. But they created these cartoon characters that are supposed to represent water, oil, and gas. And you can see they all have to work together in order to get us that precious oil, which then allows us to drive the Autopia car in the Autopia attraction next door. And if you look at the description of what it says here in that text, you really become aware of why they took out this exhibit at some point, of why at some point they said, well, this is no longer up to date, this is no longer suitable for the future or for a Disney vision of the future. It says here the collaboration between these three little cartoon figures is the only way to get all the oil possible out of the ground to provide more of the good things of life for all Californians. This is conservation at its best, and conservation is true peacetime patriotism. Wow. Okay. Yeah, you won't find anything like this in contemporary Disneyland anymore. But remember, this is the 1950s. This is the Cold War, and this is the United States. Now, you can not only turn oil into gas for cars or into a bunch of other stuff, but you can also use oil to make plastic. And that brings me to my final example from Tomorrowland, namely the Monsanto House of the Future, which was a walkthrough attraction from 1957 to 1968. This was a model house of the future, entirely made out of plastic. So anything from the outer walls to the furniture to the curtains, everything was made out of plastic. It was indeed kind of futuristic in the sense that some of the features that it had were actually nowadays part of our daily life. It had a microwave oven, an ultrasonic dishwasher. Okay, maybe not ultrasonic, but we do have dishwashers. They had picture phones, which was hardly imaginable at the time. For now, well, we're communicating via picture phone in a way right now. Flat screens TV, there you can see it. It wasn't really flat, but close enough. And it was, as I said, entirely made of plastics. The whole thing was developed by the MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, so a top university in the United States, in collaboration with Monsanto. Yes, Monsanto, the chemical company, which tried to boost its production of plastics and make plastic a thing in the building industry, in the construction industry. By the way, the whole thing was so sustainable that when they tried to tear the House of the Future down in 1967, they realized it was so sturdy that they couldn't tear it down. They had to take it out like this, out of the park using a huge crane because they just couldn't destroy it. Oh. What does the future in Disney theme parks look like nowadays? Well, I promised you the example of Tomorrowland in Shanghai Disneyland. It's not like they're advertising conservation projects, or it's not like they're imagining a future where people pay attention to climate change or whatever. But what I've noticed is that, first of all, you no longer have all those attractions touting oil and plastic and those unsustainable materials. But what you have instead is an aesthetic that is much more organic than the old future of in California. So what you have here in the Shanghai Tomorrowland is an aesthetic that makes the buildings look like they were actually plants or organically grown. My example here is a roller coaster called Tron Light Cycle Power Run, opened in 2016, along with the rest of the park. This is interesting. It's also very fun if you ever get to ride one of these. It's a motorcycle coaster, so you don't sit down, but you ride it like a motorcycle, and it's based on this computer video game movie Tron from 1982. But that's not the issue. The issue is the design of the whole thing. Tron, the movie, was very, very square. You can see that grid here in the background. However, for the building, for the roller coaster, they chose very organic forms. So these here are tiles in the bathroom right next to the roller coaster. So they look like some organic structure. Here you find bee houses in this pattern on the roof here. And in fact, the entire building kind of looks like a living organism. It's almost like this is a deep sea creature that moves and that lights up. I took a video when I was there because I thought that was fascinating. Yeah, and there you can see the coaster. Well, I think you get the idea. It looks almost like it's a living thing. Yeah. So they may not talk about sustainability and climate change directly in that Tomorrowland, but they've introduced this sort of organic aesthetic, which is very much unlike that very clean-cut aesthetic from the 1950s Tomorrowland, an artificial aesthetic. Oh, I have another example from you. You think Disney has learned from their past mistakes. Europa Park hasn't. This is a very interesting example. An exhibit called The Wonder of Energy, which existed in Europa Park from 2010 to 2022, and which did not advertise oil as the energy source of the future, but instead natural gas. So at the Wonder of Energy, you could discover the fascinating world of energy in general and natural gas in particular. There's a very good reason for this because the whole area, the whole exhibit, and the roller coaster behind the exhibit, you can see it here in the background, was sponsored by a gas company. Specifically Gazprom. So Gazprom sponsored this from 2010 to 2019. And then politically, this was a huge mistake. They even made it worse by switching from Gazprom to the daughter company of Gazprom, namely Nord Stream 2, the company operating the pipeline, which was destroyed between Europe and Russia, the gas pipeline. They switched to Nord Stream 2 as a sponsor for this attraction from 2020 to 2022. And then once Putin invaded Ukraine in 2022, they immediately, it was fascinating to see, within a week, all of the references to Gazprom and Nord Stream 2 were gone. On the website, in the park, the thing is still called Wonder of Energy, but for instance, the Gazprom sign here has disappeared, of course. And yeah, they were very proud of this in the 2010s that they could win Gazprom as a sponsor. Well, they had to pay a price for this choice in the 2020s. Well, that also shows that theme parks have to navigate their efforts concerning sustainability as corporations. Who are you going to choose as a partner? Who are you going to work with? Is that a political issue? Do you want to be do you want to mingle in politics, and so on and so forth? Oh, before we come to that, at some point I was wondering, why do we not have any climate protests in theme parks? Because theme parks have been the stage for all kinds of protests for a very long time. I've given you a few examples here. This here is a picture from 1975 where a Los Angeles-based LGBTQ group protested against discrimination against gay people, and they used Disneyland, and you can see the castle here in the background, as the stage for their protest. So that was in 1975. Here, I think this was 2005. This was Banksy, the street artist, protesting the war in the Middle East by putting up a mannequin dressed like a Guantanamo inmate into Frontierland, also at Disneyland, in order, as I said, to protest against the Gulf War. So, and here finally you have someone protesting against Donald Trump, using Mickey Mouse and specifically Walt Disney World in Florida as a stage for that protest. In fact, Bethany Bemis here has written an entire book about protests that took place at Disney theme parks and America's national narratives. So there you can see that the parks have been used for all kinds of stuff, for all kinds of protests. Never, though, for climate protests, which is kind of surprising. Well, maybe we can talk about that, why that isn't the case. In the meantime, let me come to a very brief section of this talk, namely theme parks as companies. How sustainability is used by theme park companies as a corporate strategy. My example here is Disneyland Paris. I've gathered, last time I was at Disneyland Paris, I took a few pictures. So now they very prominently, they didn't used to recycle. Now they very prominently do this. These signs here are up everywhere asking people to help them recycle the trash. They also have their own website where you can see they transformed the castle into a plant, our commitment to the environment. They also have a sustainability report that they issue every year where they tell you about what they do for the environment, how they try to become more sustainable. They also put up those signs here where in selected areas they leave the landscape as it is because it's a natural biotope. And they want to preserve that. So people are usually used to very, very manicured lawns at Disneyland and in theme parks in general. So here they put up those signs to explain why the lawn hasn't been mown in that particular area, but also to let people know that Disneyland Paris is a company that allegedly cares about the environment. I've also given you some links or some titles of research articles where researchers have really examined the use of energy, for example, at particular theme parks. These are no doubt studies that have been conducted in collaboration with those theme parks because they're interested in saving energy. Now the question is, why do theme parks do this? Well, of course, yeah, if you can save energy, that's a good thing. But a colleague of mine and I, we wrote a chapter in our introduction to theme park studies about corporate strategies of theme parks, and I'm afraid for the most part, sustainability in theme parks is a matter of corporate strategy. It's in the corporation's own interest to become more sustainable for various reasons. Here's what we write. In fact, sensitivity to environmental, social, and governance issues has also been climbing on the priority list of boards and stakeholders of theme park companies, as failing to meet compliance obligations for environmental impact, diversity, equity, and other governance issues can put companies at legal or reputational risk. It is for this reason that for theme parks, sustainability, social responsibility, and circularity have been increasingly institutionalized as part of their economic strategy. More and more, they have started to not only develop environmental and social programs to benefit people, planet, and profit, but also measure and report the degree to which their economic value is at risk due to ESG factors. And it is also for these reasons that theme park companies have increasingly rated themselves through third-party rating agencies, reporting research organizations and analysis firms in order to determine their ESG scores for investment decisions. These scores can be a significant factor in attracting capital and maintaining transparent stakeholder communication. Well, what does all of this mean? Well, if you highlight the keywords in this text, you will realize that most theme parks become more or try to become more sustainable because they are forced to do so by the governments. They see the risk of losing a certain reputation if they're perceived as a company that does not care about sustainability. They want to attract money because they want to have a good rating. And in order to get a good rating with the rating agencies, you need to have a sustainability plan in operation. So I talked to one or two theme park managers. I won't say any names, but they told me, yeah, pretty much we did a report and we set up a plan to become more sustainable because we know that this is going to earn us points in the ratings and we just need those points. We cannot really afford to lose those points. So it's quite possible that for some theme park managers, for some theme park employees, in environmental considerations and sustainability is a value per se. But for the company, it's really a question of legal compliance, economic value, of getting a good rating to attract more investors. That's the sad truth, if you will. It does get a little more positive when we come to our third and last topic, or our third and last perspective on theme parks, namely theme parks as urban planners. And especially when we look at the one example that I've brought you, I've told you a city that is located next to Disneyland Paris, and where coincidentally I used to live 25 years ago. The Walt Disney Company has a long history as an urban planner. Some people say that even Disneyland, the first theme park, was in fact kind of working like a town, because it had to take care of all the issues that a real city also has to take care of: sewage, electricity, flow of people, flow of goods, and so on and so forth. But of course, there's no people living in Disneyland. There's just visitors for a day, and so you cannot really compare that to a city. But towards the end of his life, Walt Disney actually wanted to build cities, not just theme parks anymore. And so in the 1960s, he came up with a plan for a futuristic city, where he wanted to experiment with newest technologies in order to make a city more livable, and if you look at those plans, by today's standards, also more sustainable. The city was to be called Epcot Center, located in Orlando, Florida. Disney died before they could realize the whole thing. They did build an Epcot Center, but it turned out to be another theme park. So after the death of Walt Disney, they did what they could best, namely build theme parks, and so they built another theme park. It wasn't until 1996 that they actually built that city, or a version of that city envisioned by Walt Disney in the 1960s. A very small community for about 20,000 people called Celebration, right next to one of the parks of Walt Disney World in Orlando in Florida. This is a very, very American suburb. It has nothing to do with sustainability whatsoever. It's just a Disney designed suburb that's located very close to a theme park. It looks very nice if you're into that kind of aesthetic, but it's certainly not sustainable. That changed with their next big city project, namely the city located next to Disneyland Paris, called Val d'Europe, opened or started, I would say, in 2000. So it's been around for 24, 25 years. And now it really has developed, after 25 years, it really has developed a certain personality, if you will. When I lived there, there were a few houses and a huge shopping mall, and that was it. But now it has developed some personality, and I would say a sustainable personality in a way. Val d'Europe is not the last project. Disney has just announced that they're going to build more cities, and this time they're going to build cities that are not connected to a theme park. So in 2025, next year, they're going to open up a city called Story Living by Disney, a very odd name. It's a Disney-designed city, or a Disney-designed residential quarter in Rancho Mirage in California. So not anywhere near Los Angeles. They're going to do a second one in Texas, I think. So now they're expanding into the real estate business for real, not just around the theme parks, but elsewhere as well. From what I've seen, the sketches, this is once again a type of celebration, so a very typically American suburb, and it's quite unlike Val d'Europe. Well, let's take a look at Val d'Europe. This is what the place looks like. It's located right next to Disneyland Paris, so about 40 kilometers east of downtown Paris. And these are two buildings which belong to the newest development in Val d'Europe. They were built in 2021, 2022. I took these pictures this summer, so all of this is brand new. Which is kind of interesting because the whole thing looks Art Deco, so as if it was built in the 1920s. It looks a little bit like The Great Gatsby, but the entire quarter looks like that. I'm going to show you later. This is what the whole area looks like, and you can see it's everything is very close. So the area that we're talking about here is the area contained by this circular boulevard. So everything within that circle is Disney territory, so to speak. And you can find the theme park, Disneyland Paris, here. You can find the parking lot for Disneyland Paris here. The hotel zone, the Disney-owned hotels are here. And here is the city that we're talking about, Val d'Europe. Here's another map of the city of Val d'Europe. And you can see that the whole city is subdivided into districts. There's 5 of them right now. The picture that I showed you, or the pictures that I showed you with those Art Deco buildings, this is district number 5, the Studios district. You have here number 3, this is the center of the city with the train station. It's called the Station District. Number 4 is the Center District. This is the huge shopping mall, which is almost at the center of the city, and it also has an outlet village here. So that is a district of its own, no residential areas there, but lots of residences here in District 1 called the Lakeside District, and District 2, the Parkside District. Why is this important? Why is this subdivision of the city important? Well, because Val d'Europe is conceived of as a 15-minute city. So you should be able to reach all the basic infrastructure, or you should be able to make use of all the basic infrastructure by walking for not more than 15 minutes. And so by organizing the city into those districts, they have actually realized that. The last time I was there, my hotel was here in the Station District. They have a hotel here right next to the train station. And theoretically, in order to go grocery shopping, in order to go to a drugstore, in order to get new glasses, in order to go to the dentist, and even in order to go to school and to the library, I did not have to leave my district number 3. Everything for daily life, everything necessary for daily life was contained in that particular district. So that's one way of sustainable urban planning, which they used here, the 15-minute city. And that also applies, I checked, to the Studio District and to the other districts. The tourists, of course, they mostly go to the shopping mall and to the outlet village. They don't even go to these residential areas or mixed areas here. Now, this is the city as a whole. Now, when you zoom in, you will also realize that they tried to plan these individual districts sustainably. Here is just a short overview or a timeline of the development of this city. It started with a theme park in 1992, and then in 2000 they started with a shopping mall and the train station. So they did the infrastructure first, basically, and then they developed one district after the other, which once again supports this idea of the individual districts being self-sufficient, because they had to be. In 2002, the Station District, the people who lived there, they needed somewhere to shop, they needed a drugstore, and so on. And so they've been repeating this pattern ever since, with the opening of the Lakeside District and the newest one, the Art Deco District, the Studio District in 2021. Here's what this looks like. This is the Station District. And you can see the actual train station here. As usual, it looks like a modern French train station, whereas the buildings are more like 19th century Paris, Haussmann, big boulevards. So they went for a very, very classical architecture here in this district. This here is the plaza opposite the train station. And once again, you can see here the 19th century Paris architecture here. You've got usually 4 to 5 floors, and then you have a mansard roof and a metal roof. But what you can also see in this picture is that within the blocks, they establish those parks. So in between and within the blocks in the back, they always have a lot of greenery. This here is an example of the architecture in the Lakeside district. So this is district number 1. They have a huge lake here, and you can tell this was designed by Disney because the architecture looks a little nautical. It almost looks like a ship here with the round windows and so on. So you can tell it was Disney people who designed this. And then finally, yeah, I'm still fascinated by this one. The entire district number 5 here, all of this is designed in Art Deco. It looks like, as I said, the Great Gatsby, and these are some of the tallest buildings here. So you get an Art Deco skyscraper here. But once again, you see lots of greenery in between the buildings and in between the blocks. Let me show you how this works. Oh, by the way, if you're interested in this city, if you want to know what it looks like, I've created a Google map and put all of my pictures that I took the last time I was there on this Google map. So if you scan this QR code, then you can go on this map and you can click on the blue dots, and then you can see what this place looks like, at least, or the way I photographed it. I'm not a very good photographer, but you get a sense of place when you do this. Now, how is the city sustainable apart from being a 15-minute city? Well, one thing that they've done is instead of creating closed blocks, they've always left openings in between the buildings in one block. So theoretically, they could have closed this facade here, and they could have created more apartments here. But what they did is they left an opening in between two buildings and an entry into the private park that is in the interior of that block. Now, so within each block, you have this sort of little park, also with a playground for children, sometimes with a little lake, but it adds a lot to the city because you always get those, it adds depth to the city because it doesn't just seem like one wall that's up against the street, but you get a little more depth here, but you also get greenery, you get more air, and you get more light in the blocks. So this was the Station District. In the Lakeside District, they've created this huge lake. This is an artificial lake. And you find those lakes everywhere in Val d'Europe, in all of the different districts. The Lakeside District has a particularly big lake, but you'll find those lakes all over the city. They're basically retention basins. So they're artificially created lakes to catch the rainwater falling on the roofs in order to prevent flooding of the city. But they've not only created those retention basins, which are a necessity, you might say, but they've also landscaped them. And they've tried to give them a natural look, as if these weren't just basins, artificial basins, man-made basins, but actual lakes. So they've invested a lot of money into landscaping these lakes and let them develop their own ecosystem. Yeah. And during construction, they even paid attention to the natural cycle of animals, birds giving birth to their young ones. So during these times, construction was shut down. That's partly why it took them so long to build this city, over 20 years now. They could have done this within 3 years, but they also wanted to pay attention to the natural cycles of the animals so as not to disturb them. Here is another very interesting vista. This is in the background here. You can see this, the studio district, the Art Deco district. And here you can see the theme park administration. They both designed them in an Art Deco style. So it gets harder and harder to distinguish the theme park from the city. Or you could also say that in a way, the city functions as a backdrop for the theme park. And it's kind of hard to realize, are you on private ground now, or are you on public ground, and so on and so forth. In fact, here, in this case, the only thing that separates the city from the theme park is once again one of these artificial lakes. This is an area that hasn't completely been developed yet. So once again, they're doing the infrastructure first, and then they invite developers to design and construct the buildings, so that the ecosystem of the individual lakes also has time to settle in before they start actual construction here. It's very nice. I was there. They took a lot of money into their hands. It's a very nice respite. And it's kind of fascinating that only 5 minutes from Disneyland Paris, where they have like 50,000 people a day in that busy park, you can enjoy this kind of quiet space, natural space. It's a very, very stark contrast to the world of Disneyland Paris. Well, that's it from me. Here are my learning outcomes again. You should now be able to explain the principle of thematic selection at theme parks. You should be able to explain the use of sustainability as a corporate strategy in the theme park industry. And you should be able to explain the strategies of sustainable urban planning in theme park cities in general, mainly in Val d'Europe, in France in particular. If you think you cannot do any of these, then you're more than welcome to write me an email. This is my email address here, but since it's not 5 o'clock yet, I think we still have some time for questions as well. In the meantime, thank you very much for your attention.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. So we can start with a Q&A session. Oh, the sound is horrible. Sorry for that. Are any questions in the audience? Somebody? Yeah? Some questions? Well then some icebreaker question from my side. So as we've learned there, avoid any problematic teams in the theme parks. But maybe we could have a chance to transport issues on climate protections or things like that in a way of science communication, because we've seen examples of science communication. Do you think this would be possible?
Absolutely, because other organizations and have adopted theming strategies for their very own purposes. Museums have adopted theming strategies in order to not just tell people about a particular historical period, about a particular historical event, but to actually immerse them into a particular topic. Depending on the topic, this can be quite disturbing. This can be quite intense, let's say. So when you think about the Holocaust Museum in Berlin, which also uses theming strategies, where they create an immersive environment that is supposed to make you feel a certain way, that is supposed to make you respond emotionally in a certain way. That can be, depending on the topic, and especially with a topic like the Holocaust, that can be very intense. But it can also be very instructive, because you do not just convey your topic and your message on a cognitive level, but also on an emotional level. Through immersive design, through theming. And so, yes, of course, museums have done it. Restaurants and other private organizations have done it. Exhibitions have done it. Yes, of course. Science communication could also, with our limited means, try to do it. Yes.
Yeah. As a question from the audience, maybe we have a look on the chat if there's some written in the chat. There's only are there theme parks with winter scenarios? Is a question in the chat.
Yes, but it depends on what you mean by winter in a way. Christmas is definitely a theme for individual shops, but also for individual restaurants, sometimes even for individual areas within a park. So you can do Christmas all year round. That's certainly a possibility. Then, of course, during Christmas, during the Christmas season, December, January, there's an overlay, a seasonal overlay where they have parades and stuff. If you're more asking about extreme weather, extreme cold, extreme heat, um, it's interesting because yes, you do have attractions that are set in winter, or you do have attractions that are set in Arctic regions or something like that. But the temperature is usually something that they do not try to mimic. So they give you the visuals, they give you the sounds, they give you everything fits with the topic except for the temperature. That usually doesn't fit. I've talked to a designer at Europa Park. They needed a space to feel a little cooler in their Icelandic section. And so what they did was they pumped mint flavor into the air in that particular area. And that makes it seem cooler than the surroundings. So this was their trick to simulate a lower temperature. Apart from that, uh, they do not do this. You commented on your own question. You said regarding snow and winters, that will happen a lot less in the future, and if they inform people of possible loss. Oh yeah, the joy of winter. Okay, I see what you mean now. Yeah, um, yeah. I mean, there are artificial skiing slopes and this kind of stuff in weird places in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi. They have this kind of stuff to remind them of a season and a country that they never had in the first place. But well, I guess it comes now with what's that movie called? That Disney movie set in Norway, the princess movie set in Norway, Arendelle, something like that. They're building this in Disneyland Paris now, so this is winter theme. But once again, it does not have this idea of we're losing something. But this is really just promotion for a movie. But there you go. It could be done, I guess, in the sense of a message to wake people up, I guess.
You talked about this 50 minutes town.
Yeah.
Is there any cars in this artificial story living by Disney, or because the distances are so short, do they need cars, or do they have cars, or is there some public transport?
There is almost no public transport because within the city you really don't need it. It takes you like 20 minutes to walk from one end of the city to the other. And during those 20 minutes you have passed 3 grocery stores. So it's kind of there is no need for public transportation. And they do have trains and buses linking the city to other cities in the vicinity. So that they do have public transportation there. They do have cars, they do have parking spaces, but not that many. The shopping mall has a huge parking lot, but that is because most of the tourists go there. So this is not really meant for the locals, but for the tourists. And apart from that, the individual blocks, they do have parking spaces. There's a parking garage underneath the library, but it's really not a lot, considering that 20,000 people live there. It's really not a lot.
Okay, there is another question in the chat. Could you please read it, because
Yeah,
the audio
sure.
is so reverberation.
So the question says, corporate interests seem to be the driving factor behind the funding of theme parks. Yes. What needs to happen to attain funding for sustainability theme parks that educate on topics such as climate change, the lasting effects of colonialism today, and other challenges humanity faces collectively that are mainly being driven by special interest groups? That's a very good question. Quite honestly, knowing the theme park industry that I do, I don't see this coming from the private sector. This might be something for an art project, maybe something for uh, uh, a government funded place where you can where they use theming strategies, where they adopt strategies, design strategies that have been developed for theme parks. And I don't see this coming as from the private industry. But I think, this is what we have to compete with in a way. So the theme parks, they tell a story, and they tell a story for all senses. You can smell, you can touch, you can see, you can hear. The stories that theme parks tell may be wrong, and they may be fictional, and they may be not true. They may be edited heavily, but they seem very real because people are there. They can touch them. Yeah. And they're told very emotionally as well. So in a way, I have to say, well, this is what we're competing with. So when we tell our stories, maybe stories need to be told in a different way. Because the other stories, the ones by theme parks, they're so much more believable because they're right there in 3 dimensions in front of our eyes. Whereas something like climate change, it may be real in some places, or it is real in some places already, but a lot of people still can't see it. And so maybe this is something that we need to do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Question in the audience? Doesn't think so. Yeah, so I think we have learned a lot and maybe learned somehow on science communication in a different way. That might be
Maybe.
a good learning. So yeah, I would say thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you for the Q&A session and the
Thank you.
questions in the audience. Yeah. So hope we keep in contact, and if you have any more questions, you have the email address now, and you can send him also some questions if you want. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you also for your questions, and you have a good day.
Okay, coming, and see you in 2 weeks. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye bye.